Hey y'all, it's Robert, and this week's cake is a double-sided ghost and pumpkin cake, and one side is good and the other side is evil. So I made a cake similar to this last year, but without the pumpkin. So this year I wanted to do above and beyond and add a little extra touch to it. So I made a pumpkin that one side was happy, just like the good ghost, and the other side was a little moldy to represent the evil side. So to start off, I made the pumpkin first, and I used two 8-inch dome pans to create the general shape of a pumpkin. So I torted all of the cake layers, and then I added simple syrup to each, and then I began to stack the cake. So next I began to stack the cake, and I used Swiss meringue buttercream in between each of the layers, and as I was stacking it, I realized it was too tall, so I had to go back and remove two of the layers. So I was a little nervous about removing these cake layers because the cake looked too tall, but I also didn't want it to be too short, but it ended up working out. So after I did the crumb coat, I then did the final layer of frosting, and I used an acetate sheet to smooth this cake out, and I had to be careful about the curves of the cake because I wanted to make sure that it was round and it looked as realistic as possible. So now that the pumpkin has been completely covered with frosting, I added support by using bubble tea straws, and I cut them flush with the top of the cake, and then it was time to move on to the ghost. So for the ghost, I did the same exact thing as the pumpkin, and I torted each of the cake layers, and I added simple syrup to each, and then I stacked them with Swiss meringue buttercream. And again, for this cake, I used an acetate sheet to smooth out the top of the cake because I wanted to keep the curves of the ghost head. Okay, so that's the base of the cakes done now, and I have them sitting in the freezer so they can get a little firm before I touch them and try to stack them. So while I'm waiting for the cakes to get firm, I can show y'all these cakes that I made last year. So I did the happy ghost and I did the evil ghost last year, but this time I added a lot more details than what I did before. And just noting that I was only 1 year into cake decorating when I made those ghosts. So I think they came out pretty good, but I'm definitely able to improve on those skills with this cake. So the cakes are now firm, so now I'm going to very carefully stack them on top of each other, making sure that I'm sitting this top tier on top of the support straws. So for the ghost, I rolled out white fondant to 1/8 of an inch, and then I added it to the cake, but I realized that I did not roll out enough and I had to take it all the way off and do it again. So for the fondant, I'm using my hands to smooth it down the cake, and usually with cakes I don't want any pleats. I want to get it as smooth as I can, but for this one I actually wanted the pleats to stay because I wanted it to make it look like a ghost was floating. And then I removed the excess fondant with scissors and then finished the details of the pleats. And next it was time to add fondant to the pumpkin, and I used orange fondant for this, of course, and I actually rolled this one out a little thicker than the white one because I'll be adding details to this fondant later. And once I got the cake wrapped around with fondant, I cleaned the crease up as much as I could, but I'll be able to hide this crease a little easier in the next step. So I didn't want the top of the pumpkin to be smooth, so I used scissors to create a jagged pattern to make it look like the ghost was popping out of the pumpkin. So then I used fondant tools to create indentions down the side of the cake to make the pumpkin look a little more realistic. So now it's time to start adding all the details to the ghost, and I'm starting with the happy side first. So I used fondant to create all these details. So first I made the eyes using black fondant and white fondant for the details, and then I created the mouth and using pink fondant for the tongue. And next I'm adding edible pink petal dust for blush for the ghost. And I've gotten comments before in my cake videos that I'm adding makeup to the cake. This is all edible and it comes in different colors, and I'll link it below because this is actually a really good thing to have whenever you're decorating cakes to add details to it. And now it's time to create the evil side of the ghost, and this side has so many details. So to start off, I used a fondant tool to create indentions for the eyes and the mouth. And I'm creating indentions on the face because I wanted this side to have a lot more details and depth. And next I filled in the eyes and the mouth by making a paint using black gel food coloring and clear vanilla extract. Now that the eyes and the mouth have been filled in, I'm now just adding in details by adding red around the eyes and then using petal dust to create a little more dimension on the ghost. So for the pumpkin on the evil side, I used fondant tools to create indentions in the fondant, and then I used black, green, and white petal dust for all the details. So I'm creating the teeth for this cake by using gum paste instead of fondant because it will harden and hold its shape a lot more than fondant would. And now that the teeth have been added, I'm now using my black paint and petal dust to create details on the teeth. Next, I made a hat for the ghost, which is just the lid of the pumpkin. So I used fondant for this, and then I added more details to the evil side to make it match the mold of the pumpkin. And now it's time to add the finishing details to this cake. So after hours of making this cake, it's finally complete, and I think it looks amazing. So that's it for Halloween cakes this year, but make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel and comment below what cakes you want to see me make next. So I was a little nervous why did I roll my R? Okay. I wanted the face to have a little depth. Am I hungry? I think I am. All right. And I'm creating in. Alright, should I start singing at the end of my videos? Do y'all want me to do that? I put a spell on you, and now you're mine.